Welcome to Roof of the World, Tibet in Context, a podcast by the Foundation for Non-Violent Alternatives. Welcome to the podcast. In today's podcast, we're going to be talking about what happens when China seeks to bully and influence European democracies by attempting to prevent peaceful protests against the Chinese Communist Party. As oppression has intensified in the PRC, the visits of Communist Party leaders to the West have naturally been the focus of peaceful protest. Tibetans, Uyghurs, Hong Kongers, Falun Gong devotees, and many Chinese living in free countries have sought to express their anguish and to press for change and an end to killings, torture, and disappearances in China. But in recent years, there's been a disturbing trend. Police taking away people's Tibetan flags and parking white vans in front of protesters to block them from honored Chinese guests. Chinese people seizing Tibetan flags from demonstrators and throwing them into the river. In London, a Tiananmen Square protester standing in the street with placards being violently arrested before Xi Jinping's car turned the corner, and 2 Tibetan women taken into custody and their computers seized from their homes in the middle of the night. Our 3 guests today have direct experience of these bullying tactics and how Western police forces colluded with them. And they decided to fight back, achieving significant victories in holding both the CCP and their own governments and security services to account. This has taken years of work. In Denmark alone, 2 official Tibet commissions ruled on the treatment of protesters during visits by Chinese leaders, including Hu Jintao, from the years 1995 to 2018, as well as the specific period of 2012-2014. It was only revealed in 2021 as a result that the Danish government pressured the police to be heavy-handed with protesters during official visits of Chinese in Denmark. We're delighted to welcome Xiao Zhang in London, Martin Bursik in Prague, and Andersen in Copenhagen. And I think this is the first time that you've all spoken together about your experiences and indeed historic work in defending our freedoms in this way, sending an important message to both China, the Chinese government, and to our own governments. So welcome, everybody. And I'd like to start with asking Martin Bursik about your experiences in Prague.
Yes, thank you for your introduction. Yes, so let's go back to the year 2016 when there was a planned visit of President Chief of Chinese Communist Party Xi Jinping in Prague, invited by a pro-Chinese president of the Czech Republic, Zeman, who's finally going to leave his post within 10 days. We are just before new presidential elections right now. And we, as physical persons and Czech support Tibet activists, we properly announce a peaceful demonstration for the defense of democracy and human rights in Tibet, China, Taiwan, and Czech Republic on this occasion. And what happened to us, so we legally, formally have done everything right. However, the square was closed that morning by cordons of heavily armed police officers. There was a helicopter above. It looked like a football match with rowdies. The police called that an appropriate intervention with the aim to ensure the protection of protected persons, means these 2 presidents. And appropriate intervention, it's difficult to believe in it, because in a forefront of the demonstration where we were more than 1,500 people. In the forefront, there was a sister of President Václav Havel, and there was a Catholic priest. There was a former minister for Foreign Affairs, Karl Schwarzenberg, other Charter 77 activists. So really peaceful gathering. And there was not even a theoretical possibility of endangering the security of presidents, because they were more than 2 kilometers away. And there is, we within our legal system, aside of the Constitution, we do have a constitution, a Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, and Article 19 says that there is a right to assemble peacefully, and this right shall be guaranteed. And this right may be restricted by a law in cases of assembly in public places, if the measures are necessary in a democratic society for the protection of the rights and freedoms of others. So it can be regulated only through a specific law. And the state can only prevent a duly announced demonstration from taking place on the basis of the act on the right of assembly. And what we realized is that what happened was that the police of the Czech Republic, the Ministry for Interior, and the city of Prague, in fact, instead of using this act, they decided to use a regulation in the area of traffic. So they simply closed down the whole square in front of the castle, and we had no, so the road sign suddenly had more power than a constitution in a democratic state. And during this visit of Xi Jinping, it was rather clear for us very soon that the police is on the side of a Chinese visit. And so there were incidents like that the police climbed up the ladder to the first floor of the apartment building, and they took down the Tibetan flag from the window so that she doesn't see the flag when having a lunch with the Czech presidents. Or the police broke into the office and removed the Tibetan flag from the window inside the office of a private company. Or they entered the Film and Musical Arts Academy and demanded the flag to be removed. The university refused it. So this was a clear abuse of power, so that the Chinese Communist Party chairman does not see a protest against human rights abuses in Tibet. And this was all in the atmosphere when Czech President Zeman said that he was not going to China to lecture on human rights, but to learn how to stabilize the society. So completely disgusting political environment that time. So after all this, we decided to turn to the court and sue the Ministry for the Interior, the police of the Czech Republic, and the city of Prague for violation of our constitutional rights. The court itself took almost 6 years. Started with municipal court, we lost it, then Supreme Administrative Court, negative decision again. Then we went to Constitutional Court when we won it, and back again Supreme Administrative Court, and finally Municipal Court in November 2021. So after almost 6 years, we demanded justice, and in a court statement saying that the state violated the rights of citizens during the visit of Chinese president in 2016. So this is what the court ruled, and we finally won it. It's very important because through this period, it was clear that the state tended to limit citizens' rights to political order, and if we didn't speak up, our democracy would be weakened. So this is a very clear example how important it is to protect our democracies, our Western type democracy, against the Chinese despotism. And if there are individuals, politicians, representatives of the city who are ready to collaborate with these regimes, so then it can happen that they together endanger the elementary democratic values. So thankful we won it. Very principle. It was commented in a media very well. So this is in brief our story.
Thank you, Martin. And for those who are listening rather than watching, just to give Martin's background, Martin is the former Environment Minister of the Czech government and now the chair of Czechs Support Tibet, which is a very effective advocacy and campaign organization pressing for change there in Prague. I wonder if, before we go on to discuss some of the implications of this significant victory and the others, I could ask Xiao Jiang, who is a scholar based here in London and a Tiananmen Square survivor, if you could talk about your experience in London in 2015, when the Chinese leader Xi Jinping was accorded the full protocols and pomp and ceremony of a state visit to the UK. And I wonder if you could talk about what happened to you and how you later started to fight this in a similar way to Martin, really seeking accountability and some justice, and to find out where this pressure was coming from.
So first, thank you for you having me for exchange our experience. It's great to hear from the inspiring praises from the Andersen and Martin. So for our case regarding my illegal arrest, detention, home raid, and the searching of the computers and the data storage, as well as release on bail condition during the Xi Jinping visit in UK in October 2015. I would like to share our investigation, including our complaints that my wife and I filed following my unlawful arrest through independent office for police conduct IOPC on the UK police officials.
Can we take you back to the moment that you were arrested? It was when Xi Jinping was due to arrive in the city of London for, I think, some sort of banquet. And you were standing on a street corner, weren't you, with two small banners, two small placards. And one of them, I think, was End Autocracy Now.
Democracy Now.
Yeah. Democracy Now, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so you were standing there. It was entirely peaceful, of course. You were just standing there with those two placards. And what happened to you?
That is because I don't know what exactly the police operation during the Xi Jinping one during our investigation. So we found the actually UK government department with the Chinese delegation. They have several meeting before the state visit. They actually the UK police and the UK government did whatever the Chinese delegation asked for. For example, they don't want the Xi Jinping heard some slogan, especially in Chinese slogan, and also this just to push the protest away, merely miles away. According to the Chinese delegation, they asked the 5-mile survey. Also, they asked the suspension of the Human Rights Act. This procedure we just found from the IOPC the report. Also, you can look at the IOPC report online. So I just maybe focus this one. You can maybe understand how the Chinese Communist Party use the economic leverage and influence the peaceful protest, right to peaceful protest, and other political issues in the UK. So I just maybe focus this two procedure. We just decide to investigate the procedure. One is a IOPC independent office for police conduct, and other for civil claim. So after I was arrested and released, after Xi Jinping leaves the UK, they have the parliament hearing, and a lot of the mainstream media in UK report our case, including two Tibetan women protesters. So the police quickly dropped our charge, because after that they decide charge in December. They want to sue us during the court procedure. And after they dropped the police dropped this case, we just decide to filed the law case against the police. That is the first stage, is IOPC procedure. So,
which is the police complaints.
Yeah.
Procedure. Yeah.
Yeah. Then use this one, we find some very important evidence, including some is the further evidence of the involvement of the UK government department, including the Home Office, Foreign Office, and the Prime Minister's Office, regarding my arrest, maybe including other Tibetan protesters. I have also studied the economic aspect of the transaction of the Chinese British elite group in relevant to my case. Our proposal of this investigation is to achieve full transparency and accountability to all those responsible. This investigation procedure is still ongoing. This procedure is currently only partially transparent, while no officials in UK have been held accountable. In June 2019, the Independent Office for Police Conduct published its funding and decision in response to our complaints. After 3.5 years of waiting for this report, we have been left completely disappointed by the IOPC decision to let off the police officials responsible for illegal arrest, detention, home raid, and searching of computer equipment. We have learned that after long investigation of IOPC found a case to answer for a gross misconduct against the two senior police officials. However, after criticism from the Metropolitan Police Service, the IOPC reversed their decision and dropped its funding. We found that both are morally wrong and procedurally incorrectly. So it has emerged that the police official have briefed to make sure that the state visit in Xi Jinping visit run smoothly without embarrassments to the Chinese dictator, and that nothing was too wrong, go wrong. That according to police briefing. The report including comments by one of the senior police officials involved in policing the events, that protest near Chinese president is almost never tolerant, especially in foreign countries, means UK. Since the July 2019 civil claim procedure, its internal procedure has been going on that primarily investigate a reduction from the IOPC report, including police officials' statement and information relevant to our case, but not including in the IOPC report, including concrete requests from the Chinese representatives and the British government department activity involved in my arrest date. After Xi Jinping visited to UK, some evidence showed that the British official who actively cooperated with the CCP representatives in restricting the right to peaceful protest continue to gain position of the influence and profiting from the Chinese British elite trade after they leave the government position. This is partially due to agreement between my lawyer and the police lawyer that we are not allowed to publish. The publishing the information is only possible with the consent of the police. Because of the British government cutting legal ads, if we want to go ahead with the court procedure, I will have to set aside over £500,000 to pay both solicitor and barrister of mine and the police, the lawyer. So we had to put the procedure on hold at that moment. I have also a procedure asked to MPs to have Parliament investigate or authorities independent inquiry into the interest of the British elite group in their dealing with the Chinese Communist Party and the international business company, but there has been no response. After Xi Jinping left the UK, the more comprehensive and systemic suppression in society by the CCP, the death of the Nobel Peace Prize laureate Liu Xiaobo and many more prison of the conscious died in prison or in police custody, is the establishment of the concentration camp for the detention of Uyghur and the Turkic Muslim, and even harshly social control in name of the COVID-19. The recent adoption of the police and the crime bill and the restrictions on the right to strike will criminalize the peaceful protest in the UK are the wrong, varying developed that icons what the CCP regime is doing in China. So I just show maybe my experience, and I'm opposition the UK reason the problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Xiaojiang. That's it's really remarkable what you have done to pursue this legal case, and what you've found is that there is complicity at the highest levels of the establishment in ensuring the state visit of Xi Jinping went so smoothly. And just to take us back to that day, because I remember I was in the I was in the police station with your wife, Johanna, in the middle of the night on Bishopsgate after your arrest, because you had been literally dragged off the street by at least 2 or 3 police when Xi Jinping's cortege appeared in view. And together with you, there were 2 Tibetan women, Sonam and Dolly, who hadn't even been holding any placards. I think they were just standing by the side of the road as the vehicle of Xi Jinping approached. And they were also taken to the same police station and held overnight. And one of the very unusual things about this action, the way the police went so far, is that then your home received a visit while you were in the cell, and your computer was taken away. And from what I can remember, also your wife's iPad.
Yeah, as my wife's iPad. Almost the 2 is UPS, USP. This data storage of take. They actually take the mobile phone and use this police software program. They just copy the data from my mobile phone.
And they
try to log in my Gmail account, and they log in my Apple account. Actually, I cannot use the Apple account when they return my computer. So I can account. I just gave up this account because I cannot log in, because they try to log in my Apple account for many times. They locked this account. The account cannot not useful. So I just use a new account. Because you mentioned a very important issue. When they arrest me using name a breach of peace, it means police official only can hold me maximum 6 hours. That's why it become the second arrest. It's a very serious charge. It's conspiracy in public section of the public order. The section 5, it means they can hold you 44 hours. But if you see conspiracy is a condition, is not only me. That's why you can understand that after I was arrested, 10 minutes later, Suna and Dolly was arrested. Because if the police want
the 2 Tibetans were arrested. Yes.
Yeah. The charge means the second charge is the conspiracy. They must at least 2 people. So from our investment, I can assure is Dolly is just the stay pavement, not me. I just stayed on the street, and Sonam just be shout the slogan, but it is actually they not block their Xi Jinping's car. That is a different story, but they try to the police try to make the story conspiracy story, arrest the 2 Tibetan protesters. That's the story.
Yes, because I remember at the time one of the police officers talking about you being arrested on charges of conspiracy, and to which the response was, well, how could there be a conspiracy? He was standing on his own there on the road. Anyway, and they also went to the houses of the 2 Tibetan women and also took computers as well. So really escalating it. And I know it's been a long and painful struggle for accountability and justice for you over some years, Xiaojiang, and really the way you've pursued it is remarkable. And I'm sorry that it's the case now that you've been told a figure of £500,000 to fight this further legally. But you've already made tremendous progress, and I hope that the China hawks in Parliament right now, the China Research Group, will help to take this further politically, at least. as the UK reevaluates its relationship with China. And perhaps we can go back to talking about this. I'd first of all just like to hear from Anders about your experience also over many years seeking accountability after Danish police interfered with peaceful protests during various visits of Chinese leaders. Anders, I wonder if you could introduce yourself and let us know about what happened in Copenhagen.
Yes, sure, I will do that. And thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about the Danish Tibet case, as it's called here. I'm chairman of the Tibet Support Committee and have been involved in our activities since 1989, based on my travels for more than 2 years in Tibet. I also did some fieldwork as a social anthropologist. But the Tibet case in Denmark really started in 2012 on the 14th to 16th of June, when Hu Jintao made a state visit to Denmark. This was actually the first Chinese state visit to Denmark ever. So it was really a big deal for the industry and for the government. So we had planned a demonstration in front of the Danish parliament, and it was moved to a square 300 meters away from the parliament, where we were not really visible. In the evening of at 8 p.m., shortly before Hu's arrival at a state dinner in the parliament, the police placed 4 police vans in front of our small demonstration and told us to stop playing music. So we were not only not visible, but they couldn't hear us either. However, we were prepared for the police to try to stop us from demonstrating. So our main focus had actually been to show the Tibetan flag to the president along his sightseeing route in Copenhagen. But in at least 11 separate cases, the police prevented us from displaying Tibetan flags in those locations. The police took away 4 flags. They detained 7 activists. They threatened 6 of them with arrest and used physical force in at least 5 cases. And all of us were activists were turned away, although we were completely peaceful and stood quietly in public places. So after the state visit, the police basically denied everything. We had been prepared for the police to try to stop us, but not from the fact that they lied about it afterwards. They also hadn't recorded their actions against us in their own electronic logs, although they are required to do that by law. This left us with no proof at all. In the beginning, we had no good photos and no relevant video recordings. We only had ourselves as witnesses. So this made it very difficult to persuade activists to take the police to court. People risked huge lawyer fees because they couldn't prove anything. Fortunately, our lawyer informed us of special rules in cases of illegal detention in Denmark. Been detained by the police can take the police to court for free in those cases. And in such cases, it's the police that has the burden of proof. They had to document that they didn't detain anyone illegally. So our first 6 court cases were all limited to the formal question of illegal detention and not to human rights abuses. On the 18th of February in 2014, we finally won one of these cases and lost the rest. In the meantime, we had also filed a number of formal complaints directly to the police and also to the Independent Police Complaints Authority. The latter dismissed our complaints without investigating them. Although we were 11 people testifying to the same type of police interference in our right to demonstrate, the Complaints Authority chose to believe the police, which had lied from the start, actually. So we appealed the court rulings to the High Court. In the meantime, we were preparing for the main court cases concerning human rights abuses, including our constitutional rights of free assembly and freedom of speech. 8 of us ended up suing the police for these questions. Actually, we had been using the state-funded court cases about illegal detention to gather evidence from the authorities for the main court cases, and this proved to be a successful strategy. So 3 months before the appeal cases were about to start, the High Court granted us the right of access to material that turned out to prove beyond any doubt that the police had followed orders when they prevented us from demonstrating. We received a number of tape recordings of the radio communication between the police headquarters and policemen serving in the streets during the state visits. So the High Court ended up confirming the previous verdict, but they also stated that there was evidence of police having prevented people from displaying Tibetan flags. A few days later, the final breakthrough in our case came. Copenhagen police found a written operational command for the state visit in June 2012, which contained a clear order to the effect that any protests should be kept out of sight for the Chinese guests. This caused a huge scandal and resulted in 2 large-scale investigations, because at that time it was also clear that the police had been lying for 3 years. So one investigation was done by the same police complaints authority that had turned down our original complaints originally without looking into them at all. But now the complaints authority embarked on the largest investigation ever, with interviewing more than 400 police officers and dozens of activists. The other investigation was a commission formed by the Ministry of Justice, the Tibet Commission. So it consisted of 3 senior lawyers and was scheduled to last for 2 years. So the results of the Tibet Commission were published in a 2,000 pages report on the 18th of December 2017, and you can actually see the findings here behind me. These are the results of the first Tibet Commission, and these are the results of the second. So the conclusions by the first Tibet Commission was that 2 mid-level leaders in Copenhagen police were responsible for the illegal actions against us and for issuing illegal orders and for misinforming the parliament, because the parliament had from the beginning supported our case by asking formal questions to the Minister of Justice. And the Commission also criticized the Danish Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Danish Security and Intelligence Service for creating an atmosphere which stimulated the police to formulate their illegal orders. These results had the consequence that the Copenhagen police admitted their faults and acknowledged all of the grievances that we had put forward when we sued the police for human rights violations in June 2015. On top of this, Copenhagen police promised all participants in our main demonstration compensations of 20,000 Danish kroner each. That's about 2,700 euros. And more than 100 activists received these compensations. But the Tibet case was far from over. In the support committee, we had kept pointing out that the police had also tried to prevent us from demonstrating visibly during earlier Chinese visits to Denmark, so before 2012. And journalists found a number of policemen who had actually testified to this and admitted that for 2 decades they perceived it as their duty to shield visiting Chinese top leaders from demonstrations in Denmark. Journalists were also able to document that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs had several electronic backup systems that had never been searched for relevant emails and documents by the First Tibet Commission. So this prompted the Minister of Justice to ask the Tibet Commission to resume its work, but with a wider mandate this time. So the Second Tibet Commission started its work in July 2018, investigating Chinese visits from 1995 to 2018. It interviewed all prime ministers and foreign ministers that had served in this period, and dozens of government officials and dozens of police officers, as well as employees in the royal court and military officers. It collected 185 million documents, 8,000 mailboxes, and 26,000 sound recordings from the police. So its findings were published on the 28th of March last year. And this time the foreign ministry didn't avoid criticism. The commission found that its handling of Chinese visits to Denmark had been characterized by an administrative culture where avoiding to offend Chinese guests was more important than the Danish Constitution and the European Convention on Human Rights. And this is actually nearly directly a quote. The Commission especially criticized the fact that the Foreign Ministry had actively encouraged and cooperated with the police to prevent demonstrations during concrete visits. The Commission found it reprehensible that the Foreign Ministry had not specified that the Constitution and human rights had to be complied with when they transferred the Chinese wishes to the Danish Security and Intelligence Service and to Copenhagen Police. In their communication with the Chinese embassy, Foreign Ministry officials would most often say that they were not able to comply with the Chinese wishes to make us invisible, but in reality, the ministry applied a considerable pressure on the security police and Copenhagen police to accommodate the Chinese wishes. In the same way, the security service was criticized for passing on Chinese wishes to the police, with the effect that they should try to avoid confrontations with the demonstrations, but without specifying that the Constitution should be respected. And with regard to Copenhagen Police, the Commission found that they had given instructions in 2002, 2004, 2012, and 2013, with the effects that they took actions that were clearly illegal. The Commission states that this should be seen in the light of pressure by the Foreign Ministry and the Danish Security and Intelligence Service. But these circumstances do not change the fact that the actions of Copenhagen Police were clearly illegal, and it does not absolve them from liability. So afterwards, the Foreign Ministry stated that it would take a number of measures to secure that this could not happen again, but we have still to see precisely what they have actually done. So the Tibet case is still not finished, and there might even be a third Tibet Commission coming because of the scandal surrounding the reality that the Foreign Ministry didn't pass on all relevant documents to the Tibet Commission in the first case. So I'd like to speak a little bit about Chinese pressure on Danish authorities. I think this is really the Danish Tibet case is really one case where now we have actual proof of how the Chinese pressure on our own foreign ministry resulted in illegal actions on the streets of Copenhagen. So this pressure by the Chinese embassy in Copenhagen and the Chinese foreign ministry was applied in letters to the foreign ministry, in emails, and during meetings. And many of these emails and letters are actually quoted in great length in this report that I showed you before. So just to take an example, from May to September 2002, the Chinese contacted the Danish authorities at least 15 times with concerns about demonstrations during the Assam summit and the following EU-China summit, where Chinese Prime Minister Zhu Rongji would attend. So we can conclude that the Danish government caved into this pressure and in turn violated Danish law as well as human rights in order to secure a good relationship with China. And it's also interesting that the report by the Tibet Commission documents that before every important Chinese visit to Denmark, the Foreign Ministry would contact other countries and investigate how they had dealt with the Chinese visits and visits by the Dalai Lama, etc. So in their communication with Danish authorities, the Chinese embassy would also often refer to how other countries had accommodated the Chinese wishes. So as part of the preparations for a visit by Zhu Rongji in 2002, officials in the Danish Foreign Ministry referred to successful visits by Zhu in Germany, Luxembourg, Holland, Belgium, and Italy in the year 2000, and concluded that demonstrations for Tibet had to be kept out of sight for Zhu when he came in 2002. And another example is from 2009 when Copenhagen hosted the COP15 climate summit. The Danish embassy wrote to the foreign ministry that when Hu Jintao visited Gothenburg in Sweden in 2007, demonstrations were kept away from him, and this secured the overall success of his visits. So I wish that the report by the Tibet Commission was in English, but unfortunately it's in Danish. But it is accessible to anyone on the website of the Ministry of Justice.
Thank you, Anders, for that very comprehensive summary. And this is really extraordinary. 2 Tibet commissions involving interviews with literally hundreds of individuals, officials, police, and possibly a third to follow. Martin, I wondered if you would like to comment on how differently Denmark handled that compared to the Czech Republic, because this really seems to be a democracy functioning at a much higher level than certainly it did in the UK and in Prague as well, I suspect.
Oh yes, I mean, I've had the opportunity to talk to Anders several times on several occasions about this, but this is the first time in such a such a detailed description, and I'm seriously amazed. I mean, this shows the level of a democracy in Denmark when we hear that there is a principle of state-funded court cases, and just compare it with the experience from London when you have to put almost £500,000 to get to the court. So access to courts is very important, and intervening 400 police officers. This is really different. What in our case, we put it to the court and we sued Ministry of Interior Police of the Czech Republic. We won it after we invested our money in it, private money, and we won this principal case, but we did not succeed. We were evaluating with our attorney. By the way, the son of one of the Charter 77 activists, Petr Uhl, who is specializing in human rights. It's also important to have the attorneys who are specializing in human rights issues. So the case of Denmark is extraordinary. In our case, I think to conclude what this shows is that the democracy is very fragile, and liberal democracy, and it's just a failure of single politicians or several politicians who are accepting the totalitarian practices, and they accept that they set up a special rules which Chinese Communist Party asks on the occasion of visit of Xi, or of a Chinese president and party leader in the democracy. So I very much believe that the time has changed, that there are no more red carpets. I was in London. We were living in London that year when this happened, and it was a big shame. And the way of BBC, which for me until then was, a also respectful source of objective information, the way the BBC reported about the visit was, 99% information about the visit, and just very short, just one statement of the activist, and that was it. It was very unbalanced, and then fortunately this dialogue in between Her Majesty Queen and a chief of municipal police was taken, and it showed us, she showed the truth in a one sentence.
Commander when the Chinese state visited.
Oh,
What I want to say is that I hope that the public authorities in our countries which experience this bullying and pressure, that they will learn from these cases, and that the similar procedures will not be repeated. And it also shows one thing, though: if we do not speak up, so then even our democracy would be weakened by the Chinese. So, at the beginning, the intention of us in Denmark, in Czech Republic, in Britain, was to defend human rights in Tibet, in China. But finally, it turned into defending our human rights in our democracies, because they were violated because of Chinese pressure. So I think this is a very strong lessons learned, how important it is to speak up, and how important it is to keep on principles and safeguard elementary human rights and constitutional rights in our democracies.
Yes, as Martin says, we have to hope that the red carpet will not be rolled out in quite the same way ever again after the last few years. We're in a different moment in our political relationship with China since COVID and many other factors. Just to mention that Xiaojiang did have perhaps an unlikely ally in the form of the late Queen of Britain. And to mention what Martin was just saying, at a garden party sometime after the event, the Queen was introduced to the Gold Commander of Britain's security, Lucy Dorsey. And she made the comment that it was very bad luck that the Gold Commander had to deal with Xi Jinping's delegation. And the Queen mentioned that she'd heard that they were very rude. So quite an unusual intervention, royal intervention there, which of course seized the headlines here. And I think testimony to your very quiet, hard work behind the scenes, Xiaojiang, there as well.
And Prince Charles was not attending, if I remember well. Now King Charles. So this is very important as well. Yes.
Who is very close to the Dalai Lama, very close friend of the Dalai Lama, has received him in the UK numerous times. And on an earlier visit of Jiang Zemin back in 1999-2000, King Charles again did not attend a state banquet, and demonstrated his solidarity, I think, with the Tibetan people and his friendship with the Dalai Lama in that way. Incidentally, that visit so many years ago with Jiang Zemin, there was another significant victory with the Metropolitan Police, who admitted that serious mistakes had been made in blocking protesters and taking away Tibet flags from protesters. So that was perhaps the beginning of the legal challenges in our democracies. And of course, now we know a whole lot more about how important it is to defend our democracies against the authoritarian advance, but also against other other enemies. Xiaojiang mentioned the new policing bill in the UK, which makes protest a lot more difficult and which is a very backward trend. Xiaojiang, I wondered if you wanted to comment at all on your feelings now about the UK in regard to its relationship with China, and how optimistic you are in terms of a new generation of political leaders perhaps facing up to China more strongly here.
I think maybe more challenge about this business relation and economic relation, because the UK keep very close economic relation with China. So that is the China can use this economic leverage, influence a lot of things. Maybe most people just now look at the Confucius Institute in university. Also, sometimes the Chinese government and is called some Gango organization gave the money to the university. They not called it Confucianism, such as they called it the developed study in UK. So whole the things, even you can look the parliament, the UK is a 48 club group. You can look the cross the party parliament member, actually this belong to this group. Actually, the Chinese government can give very influence to the UK, the foreign policy, and also they can influence inside right to a peaceful protest, and also they influence the other thing. Also, UK political system is the big problem. They very they can very changed and influenced by the Chinese economic leverage. I still, even the COVID, a lot of people maybe think about situation changed, but still this you can look at the lot of the things that the current UK government did not deal with. Right, during the COVID, we cannot buy the face mask. They must import from the Chinese product, because it's very cheap one. The cheap labor in China, they can export the UK, but the UK, the labor did not product by this one. Also, they not product the labor in China. Actually, the influence the UK whole the system, the model. That I think the challenge, not the democracy way, also the challenge economic model. Also, if you think about the democracy, not only political way, also including the economic way, also the right to peaceful protest, also the free expression, or the free assembling, free organization, also the relevant how the system, how the UK want to do. That is a big question. Yeah.
Thank you, Xiaojiang. So a lot to think about. I think we're going to wrap up about now, and I just wanted before we wrap up, is there anything that any of the three of you want to conclude or make any concluding comments?
Yes, perhaps. Well, the latest report by the Tibet Commission documents several cases of Tibetan leaders visiting Denmark, and to which extent our foreign ministry tried to prevent meetings between these leaders and Danish parliamentarians. So this has been documented by going through email exchanges between the Prime Minister's office and the Parliament and the Foreign Ministry. So there's a lot of material there actually that could be used by us as background information whenever we prepare our next visits by Tibetan exile president.
Mm-hmm.
But this is all in Danish, of course, and we don't really have the capacity to translate all of this. And the relevant information is it's quite far from one piece of relevant information to the next in the report. So it's difficult to know how to translate this into English.
In contrast, in Prague, there's a very pro-Tibet mayor, I believe, and also some quite positive action in support of Taiwan and pushback more recently, Martin, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I mean, I think that except of Germany, Chancellor Scholz, who visited Xi shortly after being re-elected, which I consider as a big shame, this kind of support. So I think that the atmosphere has changed a lot, and there is not a politician who's speaking about China as a great opportunity. Politicians consider China more as a threat, and I think the lessons learned from COVID, Chinese virus, the way they handled with not informing the world, and what it has caused to the economy globally. It shows how fragile this long supply chains where we are producing goods in China and then it's destroying the whole economy. I think this is a big lesson learned, and I'm working in a field of climate change and renewable energies, and I follow a lot the European strategy and politics on this because I'm chairing the European Renewable Energy Federation, and I see a big change. There are strategic documents of a European Commission, which, for example, in the field of photovoltaics, are asking to transfer the production of photovoltaic panels and technologies from China to Europe because we are undergoing a huge decarbonization process, and we can't be dependent on Chinese technology. Very recently, there are information that in North Scandinavia, a new sources of the rare minerals, which are like lithium and others, were found. So Europe understands the danger of being dependent on totalitarian China, and puts an effort to cut the dependency. And we are starting to speak not just about the carbon border tax. That means that you put a tax on import of goods from countries when there are no carbon markets and the value of carbon is not set up. But we are starting to talk about human rights border tax that the citizens of liberal democracies are interested in, and especially a new upcoming generation. People are more and more interested about the state of the art of human rights. Look at the Volkswagen, highly probably leaving Xinjiang. So I'm rather optimistic. I think that the atmosphere has changed a lot. China is not an opportunity; it's more a threat. Nevertheless, we have to care of not just of Tibetans and try to help them to become free finally, but also protect our democracies out of this kind of pressure and bullying.
I think that's a good place to end on a positive note about the changed atmosphere that I think we're certainly seeing across the EU and Britain too. So I'd like to thank you all, Xiaojiang, Anders, Andersen, Martin Bursick. Thank you so much for participating in this very illuminating discussion, and let's see how these efforts continue in protecting our own democracies, as well as fighting against the Chinese Communist Party system. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, and Tashi Dilek.